I know Joe's been speaking, but to the folks on the line, Joe is a leading thinker and award-winning speaker in the areas of HR technology, social media, marketing, and web usability. He's a top-rated speaker for the Society of Human Resources Management, or many of you know as SHRM, and is currently the Chief Marketing Officer for Delphia Consulting, is a human resources and payroll software consulting firm based out of Columbus, Ohio. So Joe brings about 30 years of experience working in information technology, usability, and human resources. In addition, Joe serves on the Human Resources Association of Central Ohio Board of Directors as the VP of Certification. So as you've seen, today's Joe is going to be talking about how we can help create structure around goals and managing goals in a way that's going to help engage employees and drive success through the business, because as we all know, hope is not a strategy. So Joe has a nice presentation. We certainly want this to be as interactive as possible, but a little bit of housekeeping. There's a lot of content that we have to share today. So we will be keeping the lines muted during the course of the presentation. If you do have any questions, please type them into the chat. We'll be having a Q&A session after. Time permitting, we'll be answering questions as well. In addition, we will be recording this webinar and sending it out after the presentation, so you can review it or share it internally or externally if and as needed. So
Can you hear me okay, Nathan? I know you just cut out on me.
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, so we ready to start? I couldn't hear the end of your thing. You cut out. It was weird.
Oh, yes, we are good to go. So the floor is yours, Joe.
Cool. So we're going to talk about how to drive success. And right here in the title, we talk about success and then goal management and boost engagement. Well, let's talk about how all this ties together. I think it really comes down to the engagement part of that. Here's some research, and it's very consistent over the last 5 years or so, about the role engagement plays in a company's success. In this case, the numbers don't lie. Organizations with highly engaged employees had an average 3-year revenue growth over 2 times greater than those who had employees that just showed average engagement. And Harvard Business Review did a survey, and 71% of C-something-Os regarded employee engagement as indispensable to a company's success. And I think this guy has it right. This is David Swanson, the Executive VP of HR for SAP. If employees are not constantly thinking about how they could do their work better and more efficient, the company has already lost the battle. So we have a lot of statistics here that say engagement makes a big difference. But what is engagement? Well, it's not the same as job satisfaction. Engagement is really the extent that employees kind of go that extra mile, if you will. They feel passionate about their jobs, or they're very committed to the organization. They do that little bit of extra, that little bit of discretionary work that we may not see other folks who are less engaged go that extra little bit. Now, there are organizations who really promote engagement, and then that breeds a culture where you get more engagement. We've seen examples of this in many organizations, and some of these you might be familiar with. Full Contact is one of my favorites. They give their employees $7,500 a year to take a paid vacation. They can go anywhere they want, they can do anything they want with that money, but there are rules. The number one thing, you have to go somewhere, you can't just stay home, and you can't answer any work emails or phone calls. You can't open up your email, you can't respond, you can't check voicemail. If you do, you blow the money. And it's not that they're trying to force people out, but they're trying to say, look, we value your work-life balance, and we'll be okay without you. We want you to go, really rest up, feel great, and come back fully energized. I think that's a fantastic example. Southwest, they have all sorts of techniques to kind of boost engagement. One of them was Southwest employees helped design their own uniforms. That just got folks really engaged in that culture of, hey, we own this airlines, we make a difference. And I think you see it if you've ever flown Southwest and had one of their attendants who kind of sings that safety greeting. You don't have to spend much money, though. Legal Monkeys is a great example. They went out and bought a picture frame at a thrift store, so it was about $3, a glass picture frame, and they pass it out with someone with a written note that they put on with like a dry erase marker. So if you rock my world, I get the frame. If I've got it, I can put, hey, Becky, you rocked my world, and I can put it on your desk, and that's it, just to show appreciation. Anybody who sees the frame there can read it. They know, hey, somebody acknowledged Becky's efforts. When you're done with it, and that's as long as you'd like, it could be a day, it could be a week, it's totally up to you. You erase it, and when someone rocks your world, you go put it on their desk with a message. So that's a cheap way to just show folks, hey, we care about each other. Screwfix, every 2 weeks, employees have opportunity to give feedback about guidelines, rules, the culture to their managers, good and bad, and it's in a very, very safe space. So these are just some examples of companies that are doing things to really breed a culture where employees are engaged and they feel like they make a difference. Now, what does that mean, though, to feel engaged? Are you engaged with the people you work with or the job? Well, I think it comes down to 4 different types of employee engagement. You can be engaged towards the organization. So these are folks who really identify with the mission, vision, and values of an organization. I see this a lot as an example with nonprofits, folks who work for a nonprofit. A lot of folks who go to that space tend to gravitate there because they really feel passionately about the vision of that organization. I was on an airplane flight once, and I was sitting next to a woman who was flying to Columbus, Ohio in this case, and she was here to help rehabilitate dogs. And so I said, what, could you help explain this to me? And she said, well, I work with a special team of folks at the ASPCA, and when the government breaks up, a dog fighting ring, a really nasty bad thing, she said those dogs are really part of like evidence protection. They can't go to a public facility. They have to be there till the court case comes. But in some cases, they're, not nice. They really need a lot of attention to get those dogs to change to be adoptable. And so she said, I fly around the country, and that's the kind of animals I work with, in an undisclosed location. And she went on and on about how excited she was to go to this new environment and meet these dogs. She was really, really tight with that organization's vision and mission. Other folks are really engaged towards the work they do. So they really have a very high level of commitment. They're very, very interested in being the best at whatever that job is that they do. Other folks are super engaged towards their profession as a whole. So you might see that, say, in the case of me, as an example, I'm certified from SHRM. So I went and studied, and I took that exam, and I speak at SHRM, and I volunteer at SHRM events. So towards that HR profession. The piano tuner I use is a good example. He came to my house to tune the piano, and I had to stay at home so that could be done. That was a big mistake if you've ever had that done, because it meant for hours all I heard was ping, 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 ping. And I thought, okay, don't talk to him. Just work from home. Like, ignore him till he's done. But I had to pass by him to go to the kitchen to get lunch. And on my way, he had a gadget sitting on the piano, and it had kind of a gauge, like a radar screen. And he'd hit the key on the piano, and colors and waves would move on the screen. And, well, it took electricity, and it was technical. I was fascinated. So I'm like, oh, cool, what's that? And as I said it, I thought, oh, no, 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 don't talk to him, don't talk to him. And he started to explain what he was doing. And he was so passionate about it. And he's like, this is a new way to tune pianos, and da-da-da-da-da. And I wrote a paper on it, and I turned it into the National Piano Tuners Association, and they invited me to speak about it at their conference. This could take off. This could be the way everyone tunes their pianos. And he was just so engaged with his profession about being a piano tuner. And he wasn't doing it for the money. He was there probably 6 hours tuning that piano, and it was $100. So he does that job because he's passionate about the profession. And then there are some folks who are very engaged because they're all fired up about collaboration. They like working with their manager or their coworkers. Think about your work environment. Can you think of someone in your environment who, no matter what the project is, when you say, hey, we're forming a team to do blank, This is the person who's like, I'll do it, I'll help, I'll do my part, just tell me what I can do. In some cases, you might even think, oh, they're not the really best qualified for this team, but they're fired up about it, and it's because they want to be part of that team. So folks can be engaged in these 4 different ways, and it's not like just one way. You're not limited to that one way of being engaged. You can identify with certainly more than these. Let's talk about how we build that passion in people, though. And I think it really starts with the organization. The organization has to have a clearly defined vision, mission, and values. And the vision, everybody has an idea what that is. I like to describe it as the island. We're all standing here. We're on a body of land, if you want to picture it, we're on one island. And the vision is when a leader or a group of leaders says, hey, see that island way over there? That's where we want to be. That's where I want to be in 10 years. And the vision is sometimes the big, hairy, audacious goal, the BHAG, right? So it's something where you can say, wow, that's it. That's the thing. It shouldn't take a ton to describe it. It should paint a picture of where that organization is headed. So you guys are interacting with me here through my real job, in double quotes, where I work for a software company, but nights and weekends I teach art, and you'll find me on a public television show called Make It Artsy. We've done 6 seasons. We filmed season 7 in a bit, and I go to flea markets and buy stuff and show people how to turn it into something else. So when folks say, hey, Joe, for your crafty life, what's your vision? Sometimes I say, I want to be the next Martha Stewart without the jail time. And folks who are in the crafty space, they get it. Even non-crafty folks get it, because you think, oh, Martha Stewart, she had a TV show, she has magazines, she has products, she's sort of known as contributing into that, craft maker kind of space. I get it. So you can think of it as, okay, there's that vision. That's that big, hairy, audacious goal. It's something that, where you want to be, the picture of where you want to be as an organization in, say, 5 to 10 years. The mission is more practical. The mission is, what do you do every day? What kinds of decisions do you make every day to get to that island? In other words, how do you row the boat? So the mission is much more tactical. It's saying, okay, in order for us to get to that island, we're going to do this and this and this and this. So in my case, if I use that crafty business as an example, it's I'm going to do as much television work as I can. I'm going to submit to magazines. I'm going to try to get known by folks in the press, newspapers. And so when they need a comment on something related to crafting or making, they can reach out to me. So I've got kind of step-by-step things I can do to help me get to that island, to help keep me on track, rowing all towards that island. And that's really what we're talking about here with engagement, is getting all the folks who are on the boat headed to the island, rowing the oars in the same direction. And then the last one is the values. So values, this is the guideposts that we use when we need to make tough decisions. So you probably have a set of corporate values. You hope that all your employees know those, and as they're interacting throughout the day with each other, with suppliers, with your customers, that they're using those values to make decisions. So an example, say in the Disney space, Disney employees at almost every level have a certain little budget amount, from a small amount to somebody who's working at a food stand to a larger amount for someone who's say a clerk at the hotel front desk. So if they say, hey, how's your stay? What's going on? And you say, oh, I was a little unhappy with blah, blah, blah. Right on the spot, they can say, okay, one of our values is to delight the customer, and I can do anything up to a certain amount. So I'm going to offer them a free night's stay or a free dinner. Because what's more important to us than that bit of money is delighting the customer. So these are sort of the core values. Think about the Boy Scouts, trustworthy, loyal, brave, helpful, thrifty, that sort of thing. Those are your values. And you might want to take a pause and really introspect here a bit and say, hey, do I know the organization's vision? Do I understand the mission? What do we do every day to hit that vision? And do we have a set of corporate values? And you may have them. Maybe some organizations don't. So it's something for you to think about as an organization. Maybe you have them and you don't even know if all the employees are aware of them. So you want to do some education around that. Once you've got the vision, the mission, and the values, we now can tighten it down a little bit to say, okay, what are our goals as an organization? What are our strategic objectives? So many organizations will take a leadership team and, every year sit down and spend a day or a weekend or sometimes longer to document what are their strategic objectives. And you see this in ways where folks say, we want to capture this much market share. We want to make this much top line revenue. We want to have this score on a customer satisfaction score. So these are typically outlined by management and they have very specific outcomes. So if you think about it, we know what island we're headed to. We know the tasks we need to do to get to that island, how we make tough decisions, what the goals are for the organization as a whole. Now we dial it down even further and say, well, what's my job in this organization, specifically mine? And this really comes down to job descriptions. It's a formal written account of a team member's responsibilities. Typically, it has their job title, a short description about the job, what KSAs or knowledge, skills, and abilities are required to do that job, what core competencies have to be mastered in order to do that job well. And when I visit customers and talk about this, when I go to client sites and say, hey, let's talk about job descriptions, I usually talk to someone in HR and say, so, hey, do you have job descriptions? And if they're a baby boomer, so we'll be a little stereotypical here, they're like, oh, sure. And they turn around and they've got a 3-inch white binder on a shelf. And then depending on how formal they are, they're all labeled. You go in someone's office and just look at the types of folks who collect binders. There are many folks who want them all the same color, the same width. They've got all the labels. They're facing the same way. Other folks are like me, people who pile. Typically, HR is a little bit more the binder crowd. And they'll say, yep, I got a binder right here. And they blow the dust off. And I'll say, oh, great. So you do have those written job descriptions. When's the last time they were reviewed? Oh, I review them every year. And do you do that alone or with the person who does the job? Oh, I mean, I do it. That's HR's job. So there might be a shortcoming there because typically you should review that job description with the person who actually does the job and not their manager, but the person who does the job. You can pull the manager in as well, but it's very interesting when you go through that exercise because you'll ask someone who actually does that work. Say, here's your job description. What do you think? Oh, yeah, I do that. Oh, I haven't done that in a long 10 years. And, well, this piece of machinery, we don't even have that anymore. And, well, this thing Ralph takes care of, and this product we don't make. So it's very interesting when you take a job description that's been written in isolation and reviewed somewhat in isolation or from a very pie-in-the-sky sort of view and go over it with the actual person who does that job. You could learn quite a bit and really tune those descriptions to reflect reality, not the fantasy that management has maybe imagined for what that job is all about. So if we think about it, okay, we got a vision, we know where we're headed, we know how we get there every day, we know the goals for the organization, and we know exactly what my job is and how that gets stuff done to get towards this island. Well, what about growth? We know that one of the top reasons employees leave a job is because they don't feel there's any opportunities for development. So another thing we want to consider here when we're trying to build a culture of engagement is how do employees feel about growth? Do they have a plan for development? If you just look when you go out the next time, even to say McDonald's, you'll see signs there saying, apply now, hiring now, start at so much an hour, and in 3 years you could be a team lead or a manager. They're trying to advertise right out of the gate that this job has room for development. How about at your organization? Do employees know where they could grow? So planning a path for development, it's really an ongoing process. And I like to think of it as a Venn diagram, if you remember those overlapping circles. And I think of it as three circles. It's what's the person like to do? What is the person good at? And what does the organization need? So it's really three things. It's the person's desires, the person's current skill set they're good at, and the skills the organization actually needs. So if you think about my real job here at a software company, it's in the marketing space. There's a whole bunch of skills that I bring to the table, and some of them are, painting, crafting. That's what I do on PBS. And some of those might even be really over in my likes circle. So there's an overlap there, stuff that I can do and stuff that I like. When you draw the circle of what works needs, well, being good with a glue gun is probably not important here at the software company. So there's no overlap there. It's really the intersection of those three things that's the sweet spot. What am I good at? What do I like to do? And what does the company value? And planning a course for development is growing a person so that those circles kind of change a little bit. The areas they overlap change. So it's where you can tell someone, hey, you like doing this, but you're not really good at it. We do value it, so let's get you on a training path for that. So that's working with the individual to really understand that. Once you have all that done, so that's a lot of homework, now you're ready to set some goals. And this quote comes from Scott Reed. In fact, I think Nathan said something similar in the beginning. A goal without a plan is just a wish. But Scott's quote is, this one step, choosing a goal and sticking to it, changes everything. And so now we're coming down to say, okay, it's time to really sit down with a person and say, here are your goals for right now, the next several months, right? This is what we need you to do. And when we write those goals, you've heard the acronym SMART. And if you read up from SHRM's recent HR magazine postings, they now call it SMARTer. So they've added 2 extra letters to the end here. SMART is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And if you're curious, if you want to have a little trivia fact here, this acronym first came out in 1981 in Spokane, Washington. And it was a consultant who wrote a paper about the smart way to write goals. So this is where this came from. So let's break down every one of these letters here. Let's start with S for specific. Specific goals are concrete. They're detailed. They're very focused. They're well-defined. And they're action-oriented, right? So we want to write a goal for someone that says, this is exactly what we need you to do, and this is how you're going to do it, and we're going to use verbs to describe that. Here are some of the questions that you should be thinking about when you see a goal or you're writing a goal. Is it really specific? What's going to be done? Develop, build, execute, right? These are all verbs. And how is it going to be done? Who's going to help you do it? And when are you expected to start? This is all in that space of being specific. So some organizations, you can talk to them and say, hey, so do you guys do a goal setting process maybe at the beginning of a year or every 6 months? Oh, yeah. And those goals, they go on their performance review. Oh, yeah. Can I see some of them? Sure. And you read them, and some of the goals are improve customer service. That's awful. It sounds great, but it is not specific. What does that mean? How do you improve customer service? How do we accomplish this? Who's doing it? What exactly are you measuring here to decide if that's going to be done or not? So in that case, that goal, improve customer service, be better at blank. Even if it's you say something like, build a new website, it's still not very specific, right? Is there things where how do you want it built? What tools should they be using? What time frame should that be done in? Who else is going to help them with it? So we really want to make sure that the goals are very, very specific. Rita put a question in there in that comment room. She's a crafter, so Rita, you have to look for me on Make It Artsy on PBS. We've covered specific. Let's move into measurable. Measurements are how you know you're making progress. And it really allows you to make corrections along the way. It gives you a sense of completion. So if anybody has ever looked at some of the statistics, say, about Weight Watchers, the reason Weight Watchers programs are very successful is people are asked to measure, right? You get on a scale and you do a weigh-in. Sharing personal information, I'm a type 2 diabetic. And so when I was first diagnosed, my doctor gave me the test kit and everything and told me to test so many times a day. And I was a good little engineer, and I did my testing, and I even put it in a spreadsheet, and I made a graph. And when I went back a couple of months later, I showed him the graph, and he hardly looked. He's like, yep, looks good. And then kept right on going. And I said, whoa, 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 wait. Why aren't you reading this graph? And we're talking about the trend. And he's like, oh, I can get the numbers I need from your blood work. That was for you. For me, and he said, yeah, because by testing, you'll know how your body reacts to certain foods. So testing made me pay more attention to it. And I'll be honest, when I stopped testing, I kind of fell off the rails and my sugar went high. And so then I started testing again, paying more attention to it. So measurements really help you stay on track. They help you know if you're doing something, good or bad. So there are 3 types of measurements, and this is really where I've spent probably the last 3 years doing research on, is how do we measure progress? And I think we can kind of boil it down to 3 things: milestones, metrics, and habits. Milestones are things you check off a list. I got it done. Boom, 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 boom. Check, 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 check. Metrics tend to be things you count. So think about production lines. Making so many widgets in a day. Think about sales folks hitting so much in sales. Think about folks who are responsible for customer service achieving a certain customer satisfaction score. So these are quantifiable, things you can count. And then lastly, we have habits. Habits are behaviors that get repeated over time. And the jury's kind of still out about what the right amount of time is and things like that. But generally, psychologists will say, if you do the same behavior repeatedly, consistently, over time, and typically that's 30 to 60 days, it becomes a habit. So this is where we tell folks, hey, if you go to the gym, it's hard at first, to go, say, every Monday, Wednesday, but after you've done it for so many weeks, it just becomes a habit. Second nature, that's what you do on Mondays and Wednesdays. So 3 types of measures. So S, specific; M, measurable; A is attainable. When you give someone a goal, it has to be something they can actually accomplish within the desired time frame. It can't be an aspiration or a vision. Think about in your own life, in your own world, be it work or personal life. Have you ever set a goal that was just so hard to reach, you just didn't pay any attention to it or do it at all? And then the flip side, it was just so easy, you kind of just ignored it. It wasn't serious. And we see that same thing both in personal life and in the work life. Give someone something to do that's just too hard, and they bail right out of the gate. Too easy, and they figure it's just not important. It's not worth it. Why would they assign that to me? So this is a little bit tricky. You want to find just the right balance, something that challenges the person, but not so much that it frustrates them. This is the big one. Make sure the goal is relevant. Why is it important to do this task? How does it fit into some bigger picture? How does it help the organization? Or how does it help me achieve my personal growth goals? So I'll give you an example here where I work, right? It's a software company. We sell software, and it's the kind that needs a consultant to install and everything. It's not something that you just download and click next, 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 and off you go. So I talked to our web developer and said, okay, we have a great website, talks about every product we have. That's cool. I want you to change all that and make it an e-commerce site with like a catalog of all the stuff we sell and one page for each product. Think of Amazon, how every product has a page. And the developer was like, are you crazy? Nobody buys this kind of software with a credit card and downloads it. I mean, this takes a salesperson and consultants and project planning, and he didn't see why that goal was relevant. And then when I said, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do that, But you know where it says add to cart? Just replace that button with contact sales. And you know where there's a shopping cart up top in the right corner? Just hide that. And he's like, so now it's an e-commerce site that you don't add to cart and you don't check out. And I was like, exactly. So it'll look like any other site with one page per product. But you know, in Google's eyes, Google likes e-commerce sites. So it's going to boost us up in our search engine rankings. Well, once he got how this fit into the bigger picture, higher rankings, better visibility, more sales, more top line revenue. By the way, we have a corporate goal of this revenue figure. It lit him up. And he became passionate about this project, eager to learn something new, got it done, and it really did move our search engine rankings up, which was great. His whole attitude changed about that goal as soon as he knew why it was important. How did it help move the company forward? And then as we get to that last letter T in SMART, is it time-bound? When does this task need to be completed? What's the deadline? And here again, you need a deadline that's close enough so you have a sense of urgency, but also a deadline that's achievable and realistic. I'm 54 years old, and I do not like what I call the Big Bang theory of a deadline. The Big Bang theory is when we take someone, I'll use Rita as an example. Here, Rita, here you go, and this is due in a year. Show me when you're done. That's the Big Bang theory. That's 1 year later, we hope it's going to look great when I look at it. I prefer to see stuff all along the way to know we're still on track, we're in the right direction, we're going to get it done. And I also have a rule that I call the half-life of a deadline. So if I were to give Rita that deadline today and say it's due in 12 months, in this first meeting, Rita could say, you know, I think I need longer. I need 15 months or whatever she wants to say. We work it out. Now imagine 6 months, fast forward. There's only 6 months left till this goal is due. When we chat then, Rita can't say, I need another year. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You can have half of the amount of time that's left. So 6 months down the road, there's only 6 months left. Half of that is 3. You could add on to the deadline 3 months, but no more than that. And so if you think about that, the closer you get to the due date, the less the person could keep asking for an extension. Because the theory is, as you get closer and closer, you should know better and better where you are on getting it done, and there should be no big surprises. So, time bound. Now let's put all this together. It's time to sit and work with someone on goals. First of all, I want to anchor the goal. And you can do this in a Word doc. You could do this in an Excel spreadsheet. Time permitting, I'm going to show you some software that does it. You can say, here's the goal. And this goal is because management, it's an organizational goal. It helps us get to that island. It's to help you be better at your job, or it's because of part of your personal development plan. So what type of goal is this? And I think you have 3 categories. How are we going to measure progress? Remember, we have 3 kinds. We have metrics, quantifiable stuff, milestones, checklists, and habits. And then in order for you to accomplish this goal, what competencies will you need and what values would this exhibit? And let's talk about this in a few minutes when we talk about performance appraisals. But in the case of, say, Jared building that website for us, his competencies were things like the e-commerce platform. He had to understand how that worked. And values, it might have been, say, using money effectively. Maybe he had a budget to buy software to help make that website work. And he had to make good decisions about how to use that money. So we would say that it was fiscal responsibility. That was a good value. Who owns the goal? Jared. And who contributes to it? Well, Mary, the writer, is going to give you some text, and Tony, the graphic artist, is going to help you with the graphics. All of that helps make that goal smart. I can be very specific. I can help them understand why it's relevant. I can set the deadline. I can make sure that it's attainable, right? It's measurable. Here's what I'm going to evaluate you on. The key when we're writing those goals is to do it collaboratively. Create the goals with the person. Goals aren't something a manager should create and then give them to the person and review them, right? The manager can think about them in advance, have some rough framework, but they should sit down and work on those together, right? Don't go for buy-in. If any of you have ever been to a meeting where somebody has already made a decision and they've done all the research and they never talked with you about it, and you have to get sold on this idea, they're trying to get buy-in, look around the room and you see people sit with their arms crossed. Look at that body language, right? They don't feel like they participated in the journey, in the decision-making process. So it's a hard sell. Work towards agreement right from the start. So let's see, we got this right now. We sit down, the manager and an employee, and we're working on goals, and we're making sure each one is smart, and that they tie into the company's vision, and they support the mission of getting there every day, and we've got our values and our competencies, and then we leave it alone. So when I was growing up, this was the big commercial. And you guys don't have mics, so maybe you could chat it in the question room. Anybody know what this is? What is this a picture of? And what was their motto that they used on TV all the time? Does anybody remember it? The rotisserie, and that guy used to get on there. It was the Ronco rotisserie. And his big motto was, set it and forget it. Anybody remember that? Set it and forget it. Well, that's what happens with goals. Historically, old school companies would say in January, sit down and write somebody's goals for the year. 6 months later, do a performance review, mid-year, and then year-end, do a performance review. And if you're up on your HR journals and magazines, you'll see articles, even on CNN. Such and such a company has abandoned performance reviews. The performance review is dead, blah, 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 blah. They're really not abandoning performance reviews. They're abandoning that notion of we write the goals and then we kind of ignore them until it's time to review them. That whole set it and forget it is gone. We don't do that anymore. What we're trying to do is reinforce to managers that this really becomes the time for coaching. This is that ongoing approach to helping people stay on track, helping get all the oars in the water, rowing the boat in the same direction. It creates a genuinely motivating climate, and it makes sure that we're more likely to get a match between your expectations and what the employee delivers, right? It increases the probability of success because employees are constantly getting feedback, recognition, clarity, support, they're fine-tuning. The problem I think we see is that we take somebody who was very, very, very good at making widgets, and they were so good at making widgets, we said, okay, now you're going to manage everybody else who makes widgets. And you know, not everybody who was good at doing a task is good at managing a group of people who do that task. And then sometimes when we hire someone or promote someone to be a manager, we put them in the job and there's no training. We just assumed they picked it up from everybody around them. The problem with that is that you pick up the good and the bad. So think about your managers. Have you ever talked to them about what does it mean to be a good manager or coach? There's really 4 things that a good manager does. They provide direction, right? This is really articulating what the organization's goals are, what they value. It's making sure employees understand the context in which the work they're doing is being done. How is it relevant, right? How is it fitting in? How am I keeping the boat all aimed towards the island? It's also about improving performance. Here, the manager is responsible for creating that learning environment where employees feel supported, where they're continuously improving. And how does a manager do that? Well, they assess someone's current capabilities and they provide feedback. They help identify the gap. Mind the gap if you've ever been on the subway in England. Mind the gap from where someone is, their capabilities now, to where you want them to be. What's the gap, the difference, and how do we help close that gap, right? They open up possibilities. Right? Here, the goal of the coach is to help an employee solve a problem or make decisions by asking the right questions, challenging their thinking, offering options, giving them additional information. And then lastly, a good manager removes obstacles, right? Sometimes that means taking an active role in paving the way for the employee to get the job done. Right? Sometimes you're running interference with somebody else, or you're a sounding board as they develop a strategy and they need to present things for other folks, right? So think about your coaches or managers. How did they get to where they are? Have you given them any training? Have you thought about the opportunity to say, hey, let's all review, how does a manager work in this organization? If we've done all this right, employees are engaged, you're going to get better performance, and that's going to make the performance review process smoother. Because if you sit down to do a performance review with someone, and either person in the room, the employee or the manager, makes that face, then the process failed. And a lot of times, I don't think the problem has been the employee. I think it's been the manager and the whole process. Because the performance review, the formal documentation of how well someone did towards their goals, it shouldn't be a surprise because you've been coaching all along. You've been giving feedback all along. This is just the formal write-up step. So it started with having good goals right out of the gate, and then a consistent approach to coaching the person along the way, right? So let's take a little sidetrack and see how this works in the real world. Now, everything I've talked about, you could do in Word or Excel, right? I'm going to show you an example that's in some software, but the same concepts apply no matter what the tool is. The software is just the tool. So I'm in a system here where I can log in as this person called Grace. In this case, I'm Grace, and when I click on this, my goals, or I go to my home page here, you can just look at this, and Grace has a really good idea of where she stands. Just look at the colored boxes across the top. 6 things are past due. Instant visibility. This new thing looks like a little chat box here. Maybe we'll have to figure that one out. Progress, well, it's going up. She's 26% of the way done, a quarter of the way done on all her goals. And here's a good breakdown on all the status. What goals were started, what ones are in progress. So let's look at some of those goals. Achieve $500,000 in sales. So we can bring that up. And just at a glance, Grace has a good idea of how she's doing. She's 70%, 77% of the way there. Her target was 500,000. Her actual right now is about 387. The goal is due in 35 days. It's a high priority. It was assigned by this person. And she's going to get help from Hugh Allen, John Wayne, and Don Wanderley. Now, why is that important? Think about the performance review process. When we sit down and evaluate Grace on this goal, she may have fallen short. And if she did, she could say, well, I didn't hit that exactly because John Wayne didn't do his part. Well, it's now documented that John was partly responsible for her hitting this goal, right? So on John Wayne's performance appraisal form, it's going to pull in, here's John's goals. Another section is going to say, here's the goals you were supposed to help with. Because when we evaluate John, shouldn't we also evaluate, did he help the people he was supposed to help? So now we have that nice tie-in between, here's a person who's accountable for the goal, Grace, and here's somebody who's supposed to help. If we look at the rest of the details, this goal contributes to a bigger goal. Increase revenue by 10%. So if we click that, this is the CEO's goal, Mary Stewart. So Mary Stewart has 2 things here, product sales and service sales, and those are supported by these 2 subtendent goals. It's like a parent-child relationship. Some people refer to this as cascading. But it doesn't have to just go up the hierarchical chain of command, right? A goal can support any other goal in the organization. So if we go back here and find, that Grace's goal where she says, hey, where am I here in this list? Let's go back here and see. It's supporting this. It's got categories, competencies, and values. Well, how does that fill in? Let's go back and think about performance appraisal time too. When you do a performance appraisal for someone, now the form says, here's my goals. Great. You can get those out of this or out of your Word doc or your Excel spreadsheet. You have columns for all the fields I've just showed you. You've got a section on here's the goals you're supposed to help with. But what about competencies and values? Typically, we sit down with someone and say, okay, It has to show fiscal responsibility, or let's say competencies, using WordPress, writing C code, who knows what. And we just kind of wing it as a manager, and we rate someone or comment on it. And we're likely to be subject there to the recency effect or the halo effect. Now, we still evaluate the competency or the value, right? But underneath it, in that section of the performance review, we can say, this would have been exhibited by, or there was a chance to show these qualities when they worked on these goals, boom, 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 boom. So I know some of the folks in the session today are financial folks, controllers, you're probably whizzes at Excel. It's a pivot table, right? What we've done now is taken and pivoted on the value and listed under the value all the goals that go with it. It just takes the softness out of the performance review. It gives you some more hard data, right? We also have some tags, and look, visibility. This is a public goal. That means, because it's public, anyone in the company can go up here and say, hey, I want to search for goals because I don't normally work with Veronica, or, let me find somebody who's still in progress. I don't really work with so-and-so, but they were really helpful today. Joe Black in HR was great helping me with self-service. I'm going to go over here and find his profile and that goal. It's public, so I can see it. And I'm going to add to the conversation and say, hey, you did a great job. So I can add that in here. I can even have that roll into a performance review form if I'm a manager. It's like Yelp, right? When you go to a restaurant, on the spot, you can leave feedback. Well, why can't employees do that with each other, with public goals? Now, of course, there's private goals and personal goals. They wouldn't be able to see those, but they certainly should be able to see the public ones. If you go back to Grace's dashboard, besides seeing her goals, and let's look at that last one again. This is a good example of a metric goal. Here's all the quantitative numbers that roll up into this 500,000. If you click on here, we can get the details of each one. I don't have any underneath there. I don't have access. This is confidential data. The cool thing is it can be manually typed in, or we can connect to an accounting system or a CRM system and roll that data in. So if you have this data in another system, you're measuring salespeople performance or production, any of this quantitative stuff, just suck it in from another system. It's accurate and avoids duplicate data entry. That's an example of metrics or numeric goals. I think Grace might also have some milestone goals here. How about complete performance reviews? Well, there they are. Check, check, check. So she could check that off. Say, yep, I finished that goal, right? Add to that conversation and leave a note. Did John's review, went really well? And she could post that. So you have a threaded conversation here, a place where you can add attachments, conversations, say for multiple people working on a goal or evaluating that goal. So this is just to give you an idea of the kinds of attributes you would see in a goal. Same things you see here down the left-hand side could be done in Word or Excel. What we typically see, though, is people have a Word or Excel doc, and all it has is a short name for the goal and a description. Well, we really want to see that longer description. Here it is down here. A short description, and then some of these other attributes. And if we want to go ahead and look at something even, bigger, and see if I can find my peers, I can easily go see all my peers' goals. I can go to a profile page for any employee, see their picture, their title, who they report to, what are the competencies that are related to their job, the job description if we have that available. So it's sort of like a one-stop shop to find out about this person's job, this person's goals, how they fit into the organization's goals, and leave comments. So that's an example of one way to track this stuff. So as you're listening to this, if you're thinking, wow, this is a lot of change. This is not how we do goals today. We're less formal. Some organizations may not document them at all. Other folks, you've got the description and who owns it and a date, but you've not really focused on, are they smart? Can they be measured? What are you measuring? Are they relevant? How does the employee know they fit into the bigger picture of the organization? If you're looking at these things and thinking, oh, I can't do all this. Well, I get it. Change can be tough. What you need to do is come up with a plan. How are you slowly going to change how you do goals and performance appraisals in order to get employees engaged? Because remember, we know when your employees are engaged, the organizations have a 2 times greater revenue growth than organizations that don't have employees who are engaged. This sort of thinking is in line with how contemporary HR folks are thinking. And you have to continually work to improve the process. This isn't a change that can happen instantly. A great quote by the Buddha is a jug fills drop by drop. So you make changes drop by drop by drop. Even when you do that, you may decide, hey, I can't roll this out to the whole world. Well, that's cool. Just change how you do performance appraisals and goal settings within your team. Then roll it out to a department, maybe then a location, maybe then multiple locations, maybe eventually the whole organization. That works if you're doing it, in Word or Excel. It works if you're using an app like this. You don't have to give this to everybody. Give it to one team, 5 people, right? So it takes time, and not everybody's comfortable with change, but the results can be phenomenal. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Nathan and see if we have any questions or you want to discuss some of this stuff. I'm happy to do that. I'd be curious to hear, what is your organization's, if anybody wants to volunteer, how does your organization handle goal setting today and performance appraisal? What's the process like? And does this give you any ideas on ways you can improve it? So if you're willing to volunteer to tell us, you can click the raise your hand and we'll unmute you. Rita, Kelly, you're both quiet. Rita, there's got to be something cooking out there. So Rita shared.
Question.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Rita, you shared we had a major change in management 4 years ago. Oh, with the retirement of a founder. Oh, that must have been tough. Because I bet that founder really had a great vision and kept everybody engaged. And they used it as an opportunity to refine goal setting. Oh, the founder was not a rock star. I'm not going to tell you what Rita put in that box. He was not a rock star, but she's made me smile multiple times. So Rita, for your goal setting process, do you document goals today? And if so, are you using Word or Excel? How about your performance appraisals? How are they documented? So that person who left pit managers against each other, not a great environment. Sort of Game of Thrones is probably. Performance appraisals are written annually. And have you ever had the chance to look at any of them, Rita? Do you see the goals that people put in the performance appraisal form? Would you say they're pretty good at being specific and measurable, or do you say, 50-50? What do you think? They've worked really hard to create a team environment. Boy, Rita's going to wish she had a microphone now. She's typing 9 miles an hour. Yep. And team members were really happy to contribute. Very cool. And be recognized. Yeah. I love that one example of the little picture frame. I talk about with folks about, you could put up a Pinterest board for your company. It's free. And put up a photo of the employee of the week or the month. It's free. You can take the pictures with your phone. You could put them on your Facebook page. Make sure you have media releases. But there's lots of little things you can do to recognize employees that don't even cost money. Year over year, they've seen a 2% uptick in the bottom line. Very cool, Rita. Oh, you should be proud. And they have an employee of the year. Well, that's a big goal. That the teams vote for, not the owners. Oh, very cool. How about some of the other folks who've joined us this afternoon? You're all quiet out there. We'd love to hear how you tackle goal setting, getting folks aligned to the vision and performance appraisals in your environment. Anybody willing to share? It's quiet. Let's see, Rita. We also made a big change. The admin team thanks the technical field team. They work for all of us to get a paycheck. We call them sir. Wow. Yeah, I think that recognition of folks is so important. And especially, I think organizations lose track and they focus on what we call the value chain. So this is marketing, sales, production, or operations, right to delivery of the client. And folks see that value chain. That's who makes us money. Marketing makes a lead, sales sells it, people buy it, we give it to them, boom. And really the supporting folks to the value chain, HR folks, infrastructure folks, admin, finance, they're equally as important, because if you didn't have those admin roles, in that sense, supporting roles, that value chain couldn't work. And Rita says in their environment, they ask how they can help contribute to their success. Very cool. Very much seeing your admin teams, Rita, then as service and support people to help the other folks get stuff done, which is great. As a whole, HR folks, I think, are really customer service. You have a lot of customers, though, managers, executives, employees, suppliers, but it really is a service role. Yep. Well, thank you, Rita. Thank you so much for sharing all that. I put my contact info up there on the screen. I invite you all to find me and connect to me on LinkedIn. If you're going to be at SHRM's annual conference, I'm delivering a session there in Vegas. If you're going to go to Summit in Atlanta, I'm delivering a session at Summit as well. And I would love to say hi and meet you face to face. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Nathan to help wrap us up.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Joe. Appreciate your sharing. Always walk away learning something. So thanks for joining us and sharing a message on goal sharing today, or goal setting today. For the folks on the call, thanks for your participation. Again, we will be sending out a recording of the webinar here in the next couple of days. If you have any questions, Joe's information is here. Feel free to connect with him or reach out to us here at SWK. Happy to support any follow-up discussions to help make goal setting and management a meaningful endeavor within your organizations. So thanks again, folks, for attending. Have a great day.